Hello and welcome to the BNB Show. My name is Brandon. That's Brendan. That's how you get to the BNB. We're here to give you this day 2 draft coverage breakdown. And first off the rip, I just want to say, Brendan, how you doing? I know your voice has got to be struggling over there, going through a week here now of coverage. Lots of live streaming.
It's a lot. It's a lot, but it only happens once a year.
It does indeed. And it's a fun event for us. This is where we get to really, get into this in the way that we love to, at the depths that we love to get into this in this manner. And it's been fun, Brendan, because as much as anything, you and I got to do, breakdowns on all these players. So as we were going to get into this draft, it's fun because I see these names coming up and I'm not going to be lost in the woods on these names. You're not going to be lost in the woods on these names. You're going to know who these guys are. You're going to understand what we're seeing and what we're getting back from these players. And it does just make it so much funner and kind of looking at this stuff. And that's true of today as well. We had a day 2 that was very similar in certain, let's call it theme. Let's say it's a theme, Brendan. If there was a theme of day 1, it certainly, I think, kind of carried over to day 2, maybe both for good and bad, depending on where you stand on that particular side of the fence. But first, before we get into the picks, Brendan, before we get into individual picks, give me my landscape as far as your view of things. It's just an overview here of your feeling on day 2 in general terms. And then your feeling in general terms of the draft, of course, where we're at right now after the first 2 days.
Well, I do think there was a little bit of anticlimacticness when you were going into this day thinking you had 3 picks and then you only end up picking twice. I can understand that. I also think that there is some justified confusion on the part of some people wondering, where do we go now with these positions of obvious need, of obvious, I would call it being destitute. I understand these things, but I'm choosing to look at things in a different way here. I'm choosing to just look at what we have, I'm choosing to look at the players that we got rather than the players that we didn't get. Mm-hmm. And there have definitely been years where I've looked at it that way and I've still come away feeling very unhappy. I've looked at the players that we got, not looking at the players that we didn't get, and I still looked at Jordan Brooks. I looked at LJ Collier. I looked at Jermaine Ifedi and just wondered why, like what is about this am I supposed to get all that happy about? Yeah. This year's different. In fact, in some ways, I'd say it's the exact opposite. I made a video this morning talking about this, and I believe that after day 2, it continues to be the case that this team is trying to do things very differently from how they've done things in prior years. And sometimes it is going to lead to suboptimal decisions, maybe even mistakes, but they're going to come from a completely different place. And I think the odds of success and coming away happy about things are far higher when you go about things like this.
Agreed. And that you do have to make a choice on that, Brendan, because a little bit of what I hear out there at times from my 12s about what they would have liked to have seen that would have gotten them the ultimate satisfaction with this in this draft is that you're sort of you're able to play both ends, right? Have your cake and eat it too. You can both reach for the need and for the value. And sometimes it does come down to a little bit of, if that's the methodology that you're applying, it has to be one that you're applying almost kind of in full, or it's not a methodology. It's just a happen thing that you decide to do on a given pick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the philosophy from day 1 has carried over to day 2. And again, this is where things get interesting, right? Because BPA is subjective, but I believe the Seahawks are following their BPA chart. Agreed. And I can't say anything bad about that philosophy.
I can't either, being that I'm a guy that had, like I'm sure you have been as well, has seen that was it not some of the failures in the process of the prior draft philosophy, let's call it, Brendan, 2015 to 19, wasn't really the bedrock of that, maybe not hugely favorable, more failure than success, was driven at that time, would you say, by need rather than going to value?
I actually made a video about this morning. I went back and looked at the PFF big board in prior drafts, several prior drafts. I went all the way back to 2016. Jermaine Ifedi was a 6th round pick on PFF's big board. Dwayne Eskridge was a 5th round pick. Jordan Brooks was he wasn't even in their top 100. I couldn't find him any bigger list than that. Like, these are the bad picks. These are the disastrous picks.
Yeah.
You're going to find Derrick Hall, the guys we picked today, you're going to find them on pretty much everyone's top 100 at the minimum. At the minimum. pretty much everyone's going to have those guys in their top 100. So it's a completely different thing. And that's the theme that I was really hammering home in the video I made this morning. We're not making the same mistakes. Maybe we're making new ones. That's possible. It's possible, but we're not making the same mistakes.
Yeah.
We're not.
Yeah. Agreed. That's my outlook on it as well. Is I think the way you put it too, with in the past, you would pass on the players and that part hurt, but then it would be also in favor of selecting the player that would hurt and sting. These 4 picks in these 4 rounds, maybe ones where you passed on to Jalen Carter, but Devin Witherspoon doesn't hurt or sting, or you go, oh, there's no value. What are you doing here? This is as you said, I think those charts are proving correct by PFF scores on that. And the way they looked much more correct than the team looked, and where they took those players in the position that they selected them. So I think it is the biggest truth to probably take away from these first 2-3 rounds, Brendon, in that is what's driving their board. And it may be a failure, but it is a good thing that at least they're trying something new, leaning away from something that they had tried so often that had failed in such totality over and over, draft after draft.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's dive into these picks. We've only got, unfortunately, 2 of them because we did trade out of the 3rd round. And so let's look at the first guy that we took right at the start of the 2nd round with Denver's final pick, though now we have a rooting interest in them for next year that we'll talk about in a second. But we got to Denver's pick up in 2nd round. Many were expecting on the board at that time it to be Keanu Benton, who was sitting there staring us right in the face, and a couple of other really good players, linebackers as well. The Seahawks shocked the Seahawks community, though, and indeed went with an edge in this Derrick Hall. My brain was melting there for a second. Derrick Hall, Auburn edge. What did you think about the pick? Do you like the pick?
Yeah, it's funny. The guy who makes my thumbnails from some of my YouTube videos was in the chat right before our pick, before we knew what it was, talking just randomly about how Derrick Hall was one of his favorite players in the draft, just apropos of nothing. He was just talking about it, and he even admitted, like, I don't think we're ever going to get him. It doesn't make any sense. And then it happened. Mm-hmm. So he was a guy that I evaluated a pretty decent amount before the draft. He was one of the edge guys who I thought had a certain appeal to him. He was definitely one of the edge guys that I liked and was interested by. I did have a mid to late 2nd round grade on him, admittedly. So it's a little bit of a reach, but not a significant one, not one that bothers me. What I like about him is that he'll be a 3-down player. I think he's strong enough and long enough and sturdy enough to hold up against the run. And he's also capable as a pass rusher. So you're not going to ever be in a situation where, oh, it's 2nd down and 4. We got to get him off the field. It's 1st and 10. Get him out of here. Mm-hmm. It's not the Darrell Taylor stuff.
No.
So we're getting guys who can play all 3 downs with Mafe and now Hall. And if Nwosu sticks around long term, then maybe him as well. And I like a lot of things about him. I do think he's a little bit of a work in progress as a pass rusher, like Mafe was. I think he'll be a little further along than Mafe was last year, because one thing with Mafe, he hadn't even been playing football for that long when we got him. We got him, and it was like almost new to football. It was like when I think Hakeem Olajuwon didn't even know what basketball was until he turned 17. It was almost one of those situations.
Yeah.
But in the case of Derrick Hall, I don't believe that to be the case. No. But admittedly, edge is not our biggest need. We're doing fairly well at the edge position. But here's my thing, because a lot of people talked about this, right? Oh, we already got Nwosu. We already got Darrell Taylor. We already got Boye Mafe. We already got Alton Robinson. We already got Tyreek Smith. I'm just, I don't think I can ever get upset about my team choosing to invest as many resources as possible into the pass rush. I don't think that's ever something that's going to happen, because it seems to me that that's what the great teams do. They just keep throwing resources at the pass rush until they have a deadly pass rush. That Giants team that won 2 Super Bowls with Tom Coughlin, they kept on drafting pass rushers. They had Michael Strahan. Let's go get O.C. Umenora. Oh, we've got these 2 Pro Bowl caliber pass rushers. Let's go get Matthias Kiwanuka. Let's go get a Justin Tuck. Let's go get a Jason Pierre-Paul. Just keep going and going and going and going. The Eagles, this Eagles team that assembled maybe the greatest pass rush of all time last year, did they ever say, okay, we got enough pass rushers, I think we're good now? Yeah, no more pass rushers. We don't need that. No. Even up into this offseason, they add Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter. So to see us draft another edge player, I'm never going to really get that upset about it, no matter what we have at the position, because it seems to me that's what the great teams do. They just keep stacking pass rushers on top of each other.
They do. I land in the same place you do. I think in a lot of ways it might be tough for folks listening tonight, because I think me and Brendan are going to be very closely in alignment for the most part all the way down the line. But let's go back, and I'll try to unwrap even further beyond his point to try to just go in tandem with his point on this. And that is that indeed you need the rotational rushers. I think that this gets bigger, Brendan, would you not say, also because of now the 17th game in the season and the 2 Thursday night games now we're going to have to start to be playing, which means I know that sounds a little weird at first on the surface, but think about that. Those are really games now where as a coaching staff, you're managing snaps to certain positions in a little bit of a different way because guys are too hammered from the prior week and playing in Sunday. So you need more of that depth involved with that, on top of traditionally, as Brendan just said, you tend to need this to make a grand, great pass rush. It's not about the front line guys going on their own. It's about having the guys that can work all the way through in the depth standpoint of things. So I think those points are right on line. The last one I'd put on top of that, Brendan, would also be that Uchenna Nwosu is only under a 1-year deal. Darrell Taylor only really has a 1-year deal left with him. We don't know what Tyreek Smith is. We don't know what Alton Robinson is going to bring. Those guys are big question marks and nowhere near certainty. You can write their name on a piece of paper on a depth chart, but you don't know what they're going to be. So you're left with Boye Mafe at that point as your future as it stands right now off the edge.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree that for whatever it's worth, I didn't really like Tyreek Smith that much coming out, and at this point, he's got 2 bad hips already. I don't see a lot going on there personally, and Alton Robinson hasn't done anything in 2 years, so
yeah, you can't count on what they bring. If they bring something, it's bonus, but let's not add them up on the stack like they're part of a already super dangerous pass rush when they're not. And let's also remember with Darrell Taylor, whatever he does provide, he is a pass rusher only. He's not an early down run defender. So even if we go into next year, if you talking about having early run defenders off the edge that can handle business and you know what you're getting from them, you only have Mafe and Uchenna in that respect. You're not going to want to bring Darrell Taylor out there on early downs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, I think there's a very high chance that this is Darrell Taylor's final year with the Seahawks. I kind of doubt he's going to be here after this season.
Has Carroll ever run with a pass rush specialist on the roster for any given long amount of period of time?
Really?
I mean, maybe on the back end of a rotation, the back end maybe, but not as a guy that they're looking at as a frontline guy. He always wants a guy to me that can stop the run too.
Yeah, and Taylor is a guy who's probably going to get paid because somebody's going to look at his sack totals and get a little bit excited, right?
I could see it. I could certainly see it. This is what guys go for on the open market, Brendan, for bringing that skill set. It's an important one to teams. And I've always thought a team like a Chiefs team that plays from up ahead might find a guy like Taylor a little more valuable than a team that's playing a little bit more on the button in games where it's tight and you need the guy who's a run defender at times coming in there off the edge. Question: who's the better prospect for you? Darrell Taylor or the kid we took today, Derrick Hall?
Well, at the time that we took Darrell Taylor, I think he was already like 24 and a half. Derrick Hall's 22. I think that's got to push it in his favor. He's also considered to be somebody who can hold up against the run. So I think you have to go with Hall overall.
Who's a better prospect? We'll keep one man dies, the next man continues through. This is like Highlander here, Brendan. So we got Hall or Boye Mafe.
That one's kind of tough. I feel like they have a good amount in common. Only thing is, I think Mafe was a little more of a work in progress because he was somewhat new to football. Hall is somewhat of a work in progress, but less so. But I feel like they're actually very similar. I really liked Mafe last year, but Hall might be about as good, I guess.
Yeah, I guess my perspective would be, I think Hall is going to give you more floor. I think Mafe might have some eventual higher ceiling. But I agree with you. I do like better than Darrell Taylor Hall's game. He's got some stuff that he brings. He's got three main pass rush moves: the bull rush, the long arm bull rush. So he goes between those two, and then he's got the jab step back inside, which do really work well together. I feel like you can set guys up to one and then come back to the other off that really nicely. And that stood out in his tape. And I remember, Brendan, he was the guy that I said his patented move when we were talking about him. He was the guy that had whole cans. Remember that? So he was
Yeah.
whole cans guy. And I put Terrell. I surprised myself. I was looking back at my comp, Brendan, and I was like, geez, I guess I liked him as much as your thumbnail guy. Because my player comp on him was Terrell Suggs, which I might have been a little bit, I might have been up in the, trees on that one that night a little bit, but
Well, I mean, that's the best case scenario, obviously, right? Like you could
obviously.
also probably call him, you could also do the comparison of Cassius Marsh. That's the worst case scenario. And, he's probably going to end up somewhere in the, not as good as Terrell Suggs, who is Terrell Suggs in the Hall of Fame? He should be.
He's a borderline guy. And I was just getting, I probably got hyped on his tape one night when I was typing that. And I was like, but I like the power, which is how Terrell won. I like the way that they just kind of overpower tackles and they're really just naturally able to do it, snap in and snap out. He's really got that to his game and it shouldn't be undersold. That's why I called him the whole cans. It's like, a guy with whole cans hitting a guy every time he's jostles them off the line of scrimmage, off the snap. Just a very impressive player in that respect. And he's going to fit in the rotation next year, Brendan. So I think he's going to help out. We certainly have a dangerous rotation. Like you said on that point, it's very important here. You want to build, last little point I'll put on this, Brendan. It's also been one of the things we talk about, the Hawks moving and correcting failures. You can be mad at general managers. You can be mad at the front office from not doing the things you want to do. The one thing that me and Brendan have asked them to do, the one thing that we've really been pining for in tandem a little bit, is just correcting your mistakes, recognizing things that have been a pattern of problematic behavior that then you go and you correct or at least try to change. If you can't correct, at least change course. The old, the definition of insanity thing. You've been reaching for needs for drafts for years. Stop reaching for need. That caused you to swing too wildly back the other way, and then we got to course correct off that and kind of find the money spot there, then fine. But don't keep doing the same thing. That's leading you to failure. Brendan, to your point on the edge rushers, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Part of the problem that you've had in the front four and in the pass rush over the last 4 or 5 years here has been the fact that you've not put enough bodies there, that you always keep finding yourself in that place of Ziggy Ansah, LJ Collier. We'll be fine. That's plenty. That's plenty. Daryl Taylor, Benson Mayoa, Bruce Irvin. Oh, that'll get us through. That'll handle us for the year on the edge. Hasn't that been part of the problem with in our approach to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. And look, again, it's a 17-game season. These guys are not going to be healthy in every game. It's just not going to happen. They're going to miss games, and then you're going to be happy that you have this depth.
You are. Thank God Schneider had some foresight on this. So I like the pick. Give me a grade on this pick, Brendan.
I gave it a B. I liked it. I thought it was a little bit of a reach, but it probably wasn't a reach to them. I'll say that. Like, I thought BJ Ojulari was a better prospect than Derrick Hall. He was my best edge on the board when we made that pick. Hall was 2. It was close, but I thought BJ was a little better.
And I was a titch better. I was a titch higher on, for me, Hall. Mm-hmm. But then here's the funny part about that, Brendan. Ojulari's my next guy below him on the board. So I had it as a Keon White, Derrick Hall, BJ Ojulari in my order of things on my horizontal board. So I'm right there with you. I wouldn't have been mad if they got no, and he was a younger guy and he maybe has a little more upside on that side of it than Hall brings. Is that the guy you would have grabbed if not Hall?
I don't think he was number 1 on the big board, but light my big board on fire at this point, man. Just light it on fire. Like it. Clearly, I had the completely wrong idea of how teams evaluated like Trenton Simpson, Darnell Washington. For a second there, it looked like he was going to go undrafted. Like what happened there?
I hear injury. Injury is the rumors I'm hearing. Medicals aren't clear.
Maybe, I mean, I had Brian Branch higher, but it would have been a tough sell for us to take another defensive back, I guess. So whatever. I do actually think it might be because the elephant in the room here is Keanu Benton here, but
right.
I think that this is actually probably, in terms of meaningful value, a better pick than a Keanu Benton. So there are some guys I had higher on my big board for sure, but not a ton.
And you wouldn't have gone center. You're okay. You're okay in the center weight point at that point.
Well, I think, and this is something that I talked about on the stream at length today. I think some people are overreacting to what happened last year. They look at the team last year. They look at what held the team back? Why did we lose some games? Why did some of those games get away from us? Why did we barely back into the playoffs? It's the interior offensive line was pretty bad, and we couldn't stop the run. So we don't do a whole lot to address those two things in free agency. Like Evan Brown helps, but he's not, he's not an all pro here. He's a good center. So I think people go, okay, we got to spend this whole draft addressing those two things, interior offensive line and stopping the run. And because of that, people are like, okay, here's our number 5 pick. We got to use that pick to address those problems. Picking at 20, we got to use that pick to address those problems. The reality is those two things in the modern NFL are not that valuable. And teams typically don't spend super high draft capital on fixing those problems. And this team is still looking at things through a more traditional lens. Like, look at the 2 picks that we've made so far on defense. They are picks designed to address the needs of the pass defense more so, right? Now, I'm not saying they're not going to help the other thing, the run defense, but you got a cornerback in Devon Witherspoon, a shutdown man corner, and you've gotten an edge rusher. They are going to be pluses against the run, I think, but they're still here mostly to help against the pass, which is by far the more valuable thing in the modern NFL. So the team is not overreacting to, okay, this was our problem last year, so therefore we got to take Mozzie Smith number 5 overall, and we got to take Keanu Benton number late in the first round. We got to just spend all our picks. We got to get JMS at the top of the second round. We got to get Steve Avila at the top of the second round. No, we're not doing that. We're treating those needs appropriately, I think. And I actually like that. We're not just overreacting and saying, okay, we have to spend all of our picks on the exact things that held us back last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. And I can't push back on any of it because I think it's well put. You definitely have to go to the value of your board a little bit. I think there is a draw there with Benton. He's the one guy I think there that you could have looked at in defensive line status of things and said, is really truly Hall a better prospect than Benton? Is he really truly the more valuable guy to you in that moment? Because Benton didn't slide too much longer there to Pittsburgh after that point. And I did like his tape a lot, thinking he was right there with Mozzie Smith as far as his talent is concerned. And once he went, to me, then you're out on your defensive tackle talent, which I know we're going back to value, and that was their value of their board. But there was a guy there in that place with Keanu Ben who also offered you some pass rush. That's the thing, is that he did offer you, unlike Mozzie Smith, ability to stop the run, and he had some upside to him as a pass rusher to maybe give you a little bit of both. But I don't hate the pick. I completely understand they're operating from their value standpoint on this one, Brendan. And it makes sense in that angle. There wasn't a lot of other guys. I'll say this, past that, thinking about maybe middle linebacker, which, considering, like you said about Trenton Simpson and Deion Henley with their dip into the late second round, the NFL wasn't really valuing those guys as much. We saw this last year too, right? Chad Muma. We had the kid that went to Kansas City from Wisconsin, the middle linebacker out there.
Nakobe Dean.
No, this was the kid out of Wisconsin, the later guys.
Leo.
We had the Montana State kid. We had the Leo Chanel, and then we had Chad Muma last year, I think. And that was guys we were thinking, well, these guys second round guys, and they kind of dipped on into the third round. And I think that does, to your point again, is indicative of, again, the position of middle linebacker not being valued as heavily in the NFL in the modern era as other places like, let's say, secondary. Let's push on to the next pick here that we had in this round. And then I do want to talk to you a little bit about possibilities tomorrow and a little bit about what these kind of picks might mean for the foreseeable future this next year. So the Hawks come back, and we're into that next pick at that point. I think you and I are both in agreement. Neither of us on our boards at that point had a defensive tackle with probably a second round grade. Is that fair?
I think that is probably correct. Yes, because the next one who went was Gervon Dexter, who I did not like.
Me neither.
And then Thule, who I liked, but I didn't think he fit a 3-4. I thought he was a 4-3 guy all day.
And he might be an edge at the end of the day. That's all he played mostly in college. So you're hoping maybe he can transition inside, but he didn't play inside at all out of USC.
Yeah, and then you had Zach Pickens. And I loved Zach Pickens, but third round guy.
Third round guy. I'm the same way. Pickens would have been the third round guy, but that was the end of that. So you do arrive here even with that needed defensive tackle, Brendan. People clamoring for that to be the pick, but that would have definitely been the definition of the nature of reaching. Would it have not have to go for a defensive tackle there with that second round pick?
Yeah, and let's look at the draft as a whole so far and try to understand where Carroll and Schneider might be coming from here, knowing that they're trying to take BPA. They tried to talk themselves into Jalen Carter. They had him in for a top 30 visit. Of course they did. They tried, but ultimately they said, we can't do it. We can't do it. We can't spend a top 5 pick on a guy who has all these red flags. It's not happening.
Yeah.
So then they decide to go another direction at 5. Then they get to 20. They probably had Cansey on their board, and then he goes right before we pick. So at that point, you're like, okay, do we reach for Mozzie Smith? Do we reach for Brian Bresee? I don't personally think that getting Brian Bresee there would have been a reach, but it wouldn't have been great value the way JSN was, objectively speaking.
Agreed.
So they decide, okay, we're not going to do it here. We're going to hope those guys are there at 37. They're not. You get to 37. Everyone's talking about Benton, but I think there's a very strong argument to make that Keanu Benton's not really worth that a pick in the early second round. He is, at the end of the day, a nose tackle. That is a devalued position in the modern NFL. That is a position that is losing value with every year that we play, as things like the running game matter less and less and less. So we say, okay, maybe we'll get Benton at the 52nd. And then he's gone, like 3 picks before our 52nd overall pick. So it also seems like we're getting sniped a little bit here. So I think that needs to be talked about here. Maybe we're trying to get these guys, but we're not going to reach for them. And because of that, we keep getting sniped. And that's unfortunate, but we'd rather get sniped than reach.
It's a fair enough point to that. I think my one pushback would be that is they adjust that angle of it to also then adjust on the fly the understanding that, hey, the cost to move up a little bit to secure these guys, if you're close enough to that native pick that you're waiting for that one guy to slide to, the cost to go up isn't that high. If you're up in that range of this place in the second round, we're looking to get Ben and he's going to go 5-6 spaces ahead. And you're like, hey, to move up 7 spaces, it'll cost us one of our 5th round picks. Maybe pull that trigger at that point to jump up there and do that. Or in Kalijah Cansey's case, where he had dipped all the way down to 18, 17, and now he's within 3 picks of you. And the cost, you've been trying to make trades through the first round. The cost to move up to go get him then there at that point. You're grabbing him there and the value is good to give him. You're not giving up more than probably a 4th round pick, maybe a 5th round pick to move up those couple of spots just to secure that player. I do agree with you though. It is completely true. It is leaning into the value board, which I do support. I'm not unsupportive of it at all, but that's the one thing I would wonder if maybe they could do as a kind of a counter to that a little bit. But alas, that's been more about kind of accumulating picks a bit and just kind of standing tall, so to speak.
Right.
We've got a $5 donation from Kevin Mullen. Thank you, Kevin Mullen, for that $5 dono. He says, live, love, and laugh. How we got all these all pros in this draft in 4 years? But by living, laugh, and loving. Sounds good to me, man. It says question. The only thing I'm thinking is we're really effing up other clubs' boards this year. Question mark? What do you think about that, Brendan? We kind of messing up boards this year with our picking, being a little bit.
I think we messed up Detroit's board. I think they were really, really thrown for a loop when we took Witherspoon.
Yeah. I agree on that one out the gate, Kevin, for sure. My given instinct on this is certainly early. That's the case. I don't know if it's as much the case here in the second round. There was maybe a little bit of a running back. It was a couple picks later, but there was a few more running backs that then started to go then in that spot there after Charbonnet. But I think you're right about Detroit. We're hearing the Detroit moved out of their pick because they had been sitting there on Witherspoon, that he would have gone next if the Hawks hadn't taken him. And then you've got that run of 4 wide receivers, us starting the stack of that run with Jackson Smith and Jigba. So he would have gone somewhere in that neighborhood of picks, I would imagine. I think at least on 3 of these 4 picks, Kevin, you've definitely probably got some teams jumping up out of their chair now, going for guys that they're like, oh my gosh, the run starts now. And you want to be the team beginning the run. You don't want to be the team at the end of the run, as we learned on the LJ Collier train.
Right.
That's where you're the bottom, Brendan. You're not the top in that scenario. Rain in the cut. Thank you for the $2 donations. At least we didn't spend a third round on the kicker. Yeah. What do you think about the Niners putting a 3rd rounder down?
Yeah, that was, I don't know what to say about that one.
Something
that, I guess they can afford to do it, but then again, they can't because they don't even have very many picks. You can't waste a pick on a kicker.
I don't. Yeah,
I mean, he's the best kicker in this draft, but so what?
we've seen best kickers in the draft come in and completely not be the very good kickers in the NFL, haven't we? Haven't we seen a couple of these guys that get picked high and they're supposed to be all that in a bag of chips, and then they come in and they're not even,
Right.
a Pringle.
Cade York last year was pretty bad, I think.
Yeah. I feel like there's just no guarantees with drafting kickers as much. I don't. I can't remember as much. No. I mean, there's the occasional one I guess you can draft, but hopefully he's good for them, I guess. They could afford it. How many second, third rounders they have with all those compensatory and minority hire picks, and Brendon, it was like an endless array. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't think they pick again until the 5th now.
What gets me is why wouldn't they go with, I guess they don't go with because they like the mobility stuff, but to the passing on DeJuan Jones, right tackle after McGlinchey went to free agency. McGlinchey's now way more mobile. DeJuan's not, doesn't fit the scheme. That's probably what caused it not to happen. But the value I thought would have been pretty good there for the Niners to be going. They got a good safety though. They got the Earl safety, man. They got Earl.
I gotta say, I don't love Jair Brown though. I don't know how much that stuff's going to translate. I'm not convinced.
I hope you're right. That's all I'm going to say. I do hope you're right, because he balled out there at Penn State, man. Thank you, Rain in the Cut, for that. Don't know, though. I do appreciate you, man, and I hope you're having a great night. Thank you to everybody for watching tonight. Well over 400 people here in the chat. If you can do me a favor and do hit that like button for me, I would really appreciate it. Ski Nation with a $20 donation. Thank you, Ski Nation. He says, Panthers beat us at home with 40-plus minutes of time of possession running the ball. We couldn't get on the field to score. These picks do not compute. Teams will repeat this formula all year. Am I wrong? I feel I'm on an island here. Well, I'll let you go on this one first, Brendon, then I'll throw in my 2 cents on it.
I think that this team is planning on trying to address that issue in this upcoming day 3 and in UDFA. And in the modern NFL, I do think that's how teams view things like run defense. Run defense often doesn't really matter that much. The running game in general is getting devalued in the modern NFL. I know we're coming off this year where we got killed by the running game in a lot of games. We couldn't stop the run. We lost a lot of games we feel like we should have won because of it. I understand that. But the way to deal with that, the appropriate way to deal with that problem, is not to dump a bunch of resources into it. Like, just as an example, I think the Cowboys did make a mistake spending a first rounder on Mozzie Smith. A guy who gives you nothing on passing down should not be a first round pick in the NFL today. I don't care who it is. I don't really buy it. So to me, I think that we are looking at things going, hey, we still have 6 picks. There are still defensive linemen we can get. And at the end of the day, we're not going to overvalue things like run defense when in the modern NFL, that stuff just doesn't really matter that much. I don't think the Chiefs care that much about their run defense. I think the Chiefs, when they're trying, they've invested all that money into their offense. And when they address the defense, they're trying to focus on a couple of things. They want playmaking safeties, they want versatile safeties, and they want pass rushers. I don't think they think that much about the pass rush stuff, because they're like, we'll lose a couple games a year that we should have won because we couldn't get off the field against the run. But most of the time, it's really not going to make that big of a difference. So I think that on that level, they're going, okay, we'll take the run defenders when we feel like the value is appropriate, but we're not going to reach on them. And if we're never able to get them, then oh well. I think that's kind of the philosophy here.
I definitely think that's the philosophy here, Brendon. And you could be very well right with this is where the NFL is going, where they are devaluing these guys in that manner. I do think Ski Nation, I probably personally land a little bit more closer to the range of where you're at on this, in the respect of, I think it is a big problem. I think it was a big problem last year. I think that you kind of just put out warm bodies last year on that defensive line, and teams did kind of decide they were going to take advantage of it, and they would just run at you all day long and just go, okay, we'll just beat you this way. And you had teams that were not, you should have beat. We can think 3 off the top, being Atlanta, Carolina, and the Raider game. And that's just off the top of my head. I'm sure I could come up with a couple of others within this that you just didn't stop the run. You just had no answer in the ability to stop the run at all. And it's just, it was from the fact that you had guys up front that did not command double teams, could not hold up at the point of attack, could not, do anything you need a defensive lineman to do to be any kind of impactful nature of things. And so I think it's going to come back and be a problem next year. I think some of what's driving the philosophy is what Brendan says here, Ski Nation, and that it indeed is, that's the devaluement a bit of the position. I also think it's just them saying, hey, we want to find the value within the position, but we want to find it at the value in the places in the draft to grab it. And we haven't determined that that's the place to indeed grab that in this particular draft. So, we're going to have to maybe go around the bend to get around to that. That's also why I think that these picks, Brendan, and I'll be interested to see what you think on this. This is my, of course, new pet theory, is that I feel like these picks I'm in support of. I'll give this draft up to this point a strong B. They kill it through the back of this draft, might even be able to push it up into a B plus, real high B plus range. Nothing wrong with a good, strong B plus draft. But I do feel like these picks as it stands right now, the impact of which into next year, and we talking about this team being a team that's going to push into being more than just a fringe playoff team. I think the returns are more about now 2 to 3 years down the line from now, more than they're about what we're going to get out of them next year necessarily. Not that they're not going to provide some impact or some help, but the total impact of what we had from those positions last year is not going to so far override us into a place to take this team to the next level next season, not on in the future, just next season. Is that a fair statement?
No, I think it's actually very true. I think that this team is aware they have a bad defensive line right now. I think it's about as good as the defensive line we had last year, and that's not a compliment. I think that if you take a look at the totality of what we gained and what we lost, it's pretty close to even. So I think it's a really bad defensive line, and I don't think there's a ton you can do to change that at this point. And I think that we're in a situation where we can go, okay, we can't really create any more cap space because we have a bad owner who doesn't, who's going to be out of here in 2 years, right? So maybe we're going, oh, well, I guess we're just going to have a really bad defensive line and it's going to cost us games and we're not going to be a Super Bowl caliber team. But what do you want us to do about it? Point a gun at Jody's head and say, give us money or else? Like, we can't do that. No. What are we going to do? Say we're going to quit if you don't give us more money? That's not going to work. Okay, so like, if we were really going all in here, we probably would have given Draymond Jones this 4-year deal and had that first year cap hit be like $5 million, right? We talked about this.
Yep.
Which is what the Niners did with Javon Hargrave. He's making $21 million a year. That first year cap hit is like what, 5.5?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So what can you do about that if you're Pete and John and you want to do things a different way? Maybe you wanted to take the Javon Hargrave path with Draymond Jones. What can you do if Jody Allen's like, no, I'm not letting you put a penny down on the future cap, right?
That's right.
So at that point, you just go, okay, we can tank. We could just say, let's just go 2-15 for a couple years until we get a new owner. But they're not going to do that. Nobody wants to do that.
No.
So you go, well, let's do the best that we can and just accept that it's an uphill battle for now. And I don't like it, but who can I really blame there? Like, I can't even really say that Jody is wrong for wanting to keep the books clean for the next owner. No. I can't. It's just a bad situation.
Yeah. It is what it is. I'm glad to hear you're in the same kind of conclusive place that I am on this. And it's not that it's a bad, awful thing or it's a super negative thing in itself. It is what it is type of thing. And I think you're right. I just think that they've went, look, we had to rebuild this thing all through last year. We had a successful first year rebuild through, which was great. And we did make some signings, which gave some certain indications here with Bobby, Gino, Draymond, that maybe we were going to be kind of going for it. But this draft is not just happening alone in its own. It's also right within tandem with what we did in free agency, which was a lot of those 1 and 2 year deals, which is that Draymond Jones deal that you signed on the 3-year deal, which is going to be having a $10 million plus first year cap hit versus the Javon Hargrave deal, which was 4 years at $5.5 million, which now allows the Niners to stack their deck a little bit deeper this upcoming season and doesn't allow us conversely to stack our deck as deep because we're eating up almost double the cap space on the same kind of contract for the same kind of player. And that's the way you chose to do it this year. And like Brendan says, I think it does come from a financial constraints point of view. But if you are John and Pete at that point angling in this other way, like Brendan's saying, well, then you're going to say, okay, if we're restricted in that way, how do we overcome? Well, we got to overcome by being better and stacking the team in a more efficient fashion. Well, how do you do that? By leaning harder into the value of your draft board. And so I think that they are still trying to compete. They are still trying to make this team as good as it possibly can be. But then within doing that is a little bit of a patient waiting game here of, I know some people were really hot to trot from this team being ready to go next year and compete and be right there step for step with the Eagles and the Niners. just probably going to take about an extra year to kind of get it around. But they're going to build a strong team with this, Brendon, I think, as well, because they are doing a little bit of that pure value board for 2, 3, 4 straight years of a draft. Suddenly now you've got the all pros out there. You've got the pro bowlers. You've got the team that's really well put together.
Yeah, and think about it like this. In the modern NFL, it's all about third down, right? Like that's why I say the running game doesn't really matter as much as it used to.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about third down. Think about the picks so far. You got 2 guys who are going to help your passing defense, cornerback and an edge rusher. You got JSN, who is going to be a dream on third down for all the other faults you can have about him. He's going to be incredible on third down. And you got Charbonnet, who I think is going to be our third down back because he's such a good blocker and also a really good pass catcher. So that is where we're focusing. And I can't say anything bad about that.
I can't either. I like it, even with what we're saying on, okay, we're a little restricted on next year. Does neither me nor Brendon are actually negative on this or bad on this. We're okay with them taking this approach because at the end of the day, from a philosophy standpoint, that's where they're in alignment with what we want them to do. And if they operate from that alignment, me and Brendon are trusting and that this will ultimately bring this organization and franchise success, that this is the road to get you to success. So let's get to the second pick here. I know we've talked my way around it here. Let's talk about Charbonnet fully. As a player, he is here. One real quick donation. I'm a little slow on these. I'm sorry. Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $5 donation. Thank you all the donos, Kevin. You're amazing. Says, need a better defense? Try winning top next year by sustaining drives and converting third downs. Charbonnet and JSN will help here. This front office is killing it. They are killing it. And I guess that is a good point to talk a little bit here about Charbonnet. And both of those 2 players, Kevin, are guys that give you immediate returns, long-term returns, and there's some upside on them. Is that a fair way as we start out the talk here on Charbonnet to put it with him?
Yeah, I think so. And this is a really good comment because it kind of illustrates the point of looking at things not in such a one-dimensional way.
Yeah.
Like, okay, our run defense is bad. Okay, how do we fix this? A lot of people would say, oh, you get players that can stop the run, but that's not the only way to do it. You can also take the running game away from other teams. You can take the running game away from other teams by having such a good offense that can score a bunch to keep the other team from being able to run the ball effectively in the first place because they got to go pass because they're trying to catch up. So there's more than one way to do it, and getting guys like this is another way to do it.
It certainly is. And remember, as we talked about JSN yesterday on your channel, Brendon, Seahawks Brendon Nelson, if you guys haven't subscribed over there, we talked about this yesterday, is the West Coast offense is not one of the base designs of the West Coast offense moving the chains. And one of the greatest movers of the chains is having that slot wide receiver that can help you get that job done.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing of a short yardage back.
Yeah, so Charbonnet, a player that I got to watch a lot last year because he was in the Pac-12, where the Huskies also are. So that was cool.
Oh, yeah. He's a good player. Very fun player.
Yeah, so I feel about Charbonnet somewhat similarly to how I feel about the JSN pick. I think the value is probably about right. I don't love it for a couple different reasons, but I have no doubt in my mind we're getting a good player that can help a lot.
It's a good way of putting it. He brings a lot to the table, doesn't he, Brendon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a violent runner. Every time you watch him, it's like he's breaking a tackle, constantly just breaking tackles. Got great contact balance as well. He's somebody who's runs with a lot of power and strength. He's got really good vision. He's great for a zone-based blocking scheme, which is what we run. At least how I hope we run things.
Yeah.
He's really good picking up blitzers as well, which is going to be nice because we lost Travis Homer and he was our third down back. In fact, I think that Charbonnet will probably be our third down back. He hits the hole hard. He's elusive for a bigger back. He is 215 pounds, but he's relatively elusive for that. He's a good pass catcher. Now he is on the slower side, so he's going to leave a lot of yards on the table. He's going to bust a 20-yard run, and you're going to look at the play and go, K9 would have taken that 60. That's going to happen sometimes. I think he needs to run less upright. Like he runs a little standing straight up, needs to get lower. It's going to help him in short yardage. And he does dance in the backfield a little bit. So even though I do think he is in his own way a power back, He's not a short yardage back yet. I think he could be. He needs to be a little more assertive. But I like him. I like him a lot. I think it's a pretty good pick. I'm probably a little closer to this one because he was a guy I watched a lot this last year, opposed to somebody like a JSN who I didn't watch at all last year because he didn't play. But I like him a lot.
I do love the pick on this one. So my two comps on him, one's kind of a silly one, but it just the upright running style that you mentioned is part of what struck me about this with his size. I initially thought looking at him on tape, he looked 6'2"-ish. So when he ended up coming down at 6 foot, I'm like, wow, that was a lot lower than I thought. But I initially was okay. Steven Jackson, 2 inches shorter, minus 20 pounds. And he kind of looked like that to me on tape when he was running. I know that's going back old school, but let's go for a modern comp. Nick Chubb.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair comp to the Nick Chubb? Maybe jump a little bit faster, a little bit more home run hitting speed.
Yeah, I don't think he's quite Nick Chubb. Like Nick Chubb was what, an early second round pick?
Mm-hmm.
So that's about right. Like, I don't think Charbonnet is quite as good as Chubb, but you also didn't spend nearly as high a pick to get him. I do think Charbonnet would have been gone by the end of the second round if we didn't take him. Somebody would have taken him. So I like it.
If I had asked you, who's he closer to, Charbonnet? Is he closer to Nick Chubb, which I know is better? I'll give you totally your points on that are valid. Or A.J. Dillon, who the Packers took in a very similar place in the draft in the second round, running back a couple of years ago.
That's not bad. I think Charbonnet's better than Dillon personally.
That's why I say you got to go to one or the other. Give me a one or the other that you drift. Even if it's only that you don't. I'm not saying you think he's Nick Chubb, but if you had to pick, who's he closer to as a player?
He's probably closer to Nick Chubb.
Yeah. And that's where I am at as well on it. And part of why it kind of got me when I thought of it in that way, Brendon, appreciating the value of it, because you're picking him where they picked that guy. And I remember thinking at the time when they took Dillon, like, that's a little early here. I don't feel like this is early here. And you're getting all that he brings that you talked about, the blocking, the pass catching. Hopefully he can develop as that short yardage runner and take that off of Walker's feet. One other thing we got to acknowledge with this pick, Brendon, the running back position has been decimated for 7-8 years, right? I call it the beast mode curse. You've seen this year after year in covering this. Has it not just been run through like the crews going out onto the battlefield every Sunday?
Yeah, it's not fun. I can pretty much guarantee you Charbonnet is going to start some games this year. Like it would be very, very, if K9 starts 17 games this year, that would be a crazy upset.
I'd be shocked. And he'd be the first running back in Seattle to do so since Marshawn did in 2014. That's the last time.
Yeah.
So
that's about right.
Part of getting this pick, there's the value in the pick, but also as part of the recognition, as we talk about with their drafting philosophy, Brendon, going to value. Here's also you correcting things to me, in my opinion, on this a bit, recognizing, hey, running backs getting decimated yearly, rather than just getting the warm bodies on deck on this. Let's get the value in there so that when Walker steps off the field, we're not watching the position's talent fall off a cliff when that happens. And so it's again why I come to supporting this draft overall and liking it overall, because it is part of not only trusting the value on the board, but course correcting off of mistakes that you've made in the past.
Yeah. So, here's what I'll say. The reason why I say I feel similarly about Charbonnet as JSN is because, like JSN, I wonder if you could have gotten a running back who is most of Charbonnet, or like 92% of Charbonnet in the fourth round. Like Roschon Johnson is still out there. Johnson is still out there, and I know he's not as good as Charbonnet. I want to be clear about that. Charbonnet, to me, was the clear number 3 running back in this class.
Agreed.
Bijan, big gap. Gibbs, big gap. Charbonnet, big gap. And then you had a bunch of guys bunched up at 4, 5, 6, etc.
Sure. Yeah, I'm with that.
Yeah. But I do wonder if you could have gotten better value picking a guy like Roschon in the 4th than Charbonnet in the 2nd, even though I acknowledge Charbonnet's better. Is he better by enough? That's debatable.
It's debatable. We don't actually know really how good, Roschon is. And if Roschon Johnson turns into being a Chris Carson type without the injury situation, well, how much better is Charbonnet going to be beyond that? Is he a guy that is going to, and that's where we come back to, is he Nick Chubb? Is he that almost a difference maker level at the position rather than being just necessarily a plus guy, which, is where you would allot Roschon Johnson if he did slide into that element, is 1,000-yard guy every year, and Roshan can do the short yardage stuff. You have no doubt about him with upright running and that kind of thing. But Kevin, you're right on your dono, in the front office is killing it overall in this draft. Get another donation here, Brendan. I know I got a couple here. I'm getting behind on. Tony Silva, thank you for the $5 donation. Says Christopher Smith is still available. One of my favorites in this class. I don't see us getting him in drafting with drafting Witherspoon though. Christopher Smith's out there from Georgia. Brendan, you liked him, right?
I like him enough to take him now for sure.
Yeah.
I probably would prefer to go elsewhere with our next picks, and I think he'll be gone pretty quickly here. But 4th round value sounds perfectly fine to me.
Yeah, if we get him, he's definitely one of my guys that would be one of my Brandon guys, where it's like these are guys who just kind of gravitated towards liking and seeing and how they play and what they're doing. And he was one of my safeties in this class that I did really like how he played and felt like he really helped that Georgia. A guy that goes beyond his measurables in how he plays. A little bit of that Brian Branch kind of thing you could apply with him, I think. But I do think, Tony, that it's probably not likely they'd look to him. I think they'd probably way down into the 5th round for like Hooker out of Ohio State is more likely how that plays out tomorrow rather than Christopher Smith. But I do like Christopher Smith. I'd be very happy if they picked him. I love the kid, and he'd be starting for us. Adams would be on his way out sooner than later if you're taking Christopher Smith, because the team's going to love him when he gets on the football field, I think.
Yeah. I liked a few guys a little bit more, but yeah, he's definitely worth it now.
I get it. And he's like, I'll get it on that too, Brendan. I'm a little low on this. I had a couple of my little pet projects in this draft that were my guys, but he was just one of those guys for me that was kind of in that realm. I don't think he's gonna be a star, but just a really good player. Thank you for that donation above, though. I appreciate you. James Valvis with a $2 donation. Thank you, James, who brings up an interesting idea that I would definitely be in favor of. Brendan, what if the Hawks traded a 2024 third to trade now for a veteran defensive line talent?
Well, who would that be? Because I don't think that's enough to get Buckner.
No.
It's not enough to get somebody like that, and you're not going to be able to pay them anyway.
Right.
So, like a Vita Vea, is that enough? I still don't think so.
No, you're not going to pull Vita in from Tampa Bay.
Are we talking more like a Shelby Harris tier player?
Yeah, that's what you're talking at that point. And you could pull that with that 3rd rounder, and it could be a guy, if it's Shelby Harris, Broncos Shelby Harris rather than Seahawks Shelby Harris. That's not bad to pull in a guy like that. Of course, right now at this point, Brendan, of course, the salary cap still remains the issue here. They can clear it up, but if you already got to clear the $3 million in the functional space you're missing, then you'd have to clear out more space to get a veteran defensive lineman in here, unless you're flipping a player in the pick. Maybe you could package Noah Fant in a 3rd rounder and, Brendan, something like that, I guess, or something. But it's possible, James. I don't have any clear guys off the top of my head. You'd probably have to wait till training camp. Wouldn't that be fair, Brendan? Like, wait through the end of training camp, see how things settle out a bit before we get to a team that's maybe willing to make that kind of deal. Maybe after the draft.
I mean, if you wait long enough, you can basically get them for free. Like, we got Carlos Dunlap for a 7th round pick because the Bengals were like, just give us something.
Right.
Like, you wait long enough, you can get guys like that for very, very cheap.
You certainly do. But it does give them an extra arsenal of picks on that to maybe move that for a player later on, James. Be of that thing that they've got to offer to. There's another team that's maybe offering a 3rd and they're offering a 3rd, then they can offer an extra 5th because they feel like they still have their 3rd they're sitting on natively. It is a great option, I think, for them if they're not able to deal with the defensive line in this draft, especially if they can find some way to create some room cap space wise to make it happen. So I think it's a great idea on your part, man. And I would love to see it, James. Post Move Lockdown with a $2 donation. Thank you, Post Move. Over under on 40+ point games this year, 4.5. What do you got? Think we're going more than 4 games of 40 points or less games than 40 points?
I'm going to say, I'll say more. Like, it should be more, right? With we have, I'd say, assuming JSN plays, what is this, a top 3 receiver core in the league?
How can it not be?
Like you've got Miami, right? Miami's probably number 1.
Are they number 1? What's their number 3 receiver?
I don't know, but their top 2 is so good, it might be kind of academic at that point.
Maybe if Jackson Smith is the truth, I think the other thing that helps this out post move lockdown is you have the defense, which isn't necessarily going to be all the way top notch all the way around, So you could end up having them matching you tit for tat on the scoreboard, causing you to have to continue to score more points, causing you to have more games going over 40 points.
Mhm.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So me and Brendan are taking the over post move.
Yeah, I'm taking the over.
I'm going 5 games next year with 40 plus points.
Yeah. One of them might be a game where we lose because we gave up 60 and we Skype 40 in garbage time, but we'll get there.
We might go 3-2 in those games, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting, Brendan. No doubt about that. Ski Nation, thank you for the $5 donation as well. Appreciate the double dono, all the donos in the chat here the last couple of days. One defensive tackle wasn't too much to ask for. However, fair point. Get the team sold so we can win again.
Yeah.
Neither me or Brendan would have been crying, squawking, pulling any pick apart outside of it being Gervon Dexter, because we both hate him with the depths of our soul. But outside of that, any other defensive tackle taken in these first couple of rounds, we probably would have been very much happy with, in favor of, supportive of. So I get where you're coming from, Ski Nation. Wouldn't have minded seeing them go for a defensive tackle. It's just that, as you say with the fair point, you can see with me and both and Brennan. So we're trying to pull the thread on what Schneider's thinking here. We can see the logic and reasoning he's applying and how he's getting to the place he's getting.
Maybe, I mean, here's the thing I think needs to be understood. I think we tried to, and it just kept falling through. We were planning on taking Jalen Carter, and then we realized we just couldn't take the risk. We looked at him and we're like, no, we can't do this. Sorry. I think we were planning on taking Cansey, and then he gets sniped. We were planning on taking Benton, and he got sniped. So to me, I look at that and I go, would you rather have them just not take the defensive lineman at all, or would you rather have some over-the-top reach for that defensive lineman? I think in the past, the Seahawks would have just reached for the defensive lineman. We've done it before.
Amen.
And we didn't end up very happy about that, did we? We didn't enjoy that experience. So they're going the other way. It's like, okay, no more reaches ever, under any circumstance. We are never, ever reaching.
That's right. And this is how we've arrived at this, Ski, is it's just we've had a past where we have gone that route and it hasn't led us to the promised land. It doesn't change the fact you're right, as well as it is a need, and it's got to be addressed at some point. But we'll see what they do here. Let's take the total of the draft. Let's see if there isn't maybe a trade. Schneider has certainly been active in the past post-draft, even if we're talking about leading into training camp, by being willing to add on extra talent. And if you go and then stack that decent level of talent at that point, rather than being early on the season, but you've built the trenches back up and you got the rotational guys, maybe we feel a little bit better about it, at that point in time of things. So we'll kind of monitor it. We'll see what it is. We'll call it as we see it, though, with it. If it is go that way where it turns into such a lightness that it's our ultimate weakness next year. Kevin Mullen with another $10 donation. Thank you, Kevin, as well. All of you guys appreciate these donos. He says, like Rogers said, RELAX. See, I was doing that because I didn't think Rogers could spell. We were a bottom 5 team last year, still won 9 games. A bottom 5 defensive team last year and still won 9 games. If we can get to 15 to 20 defensive ranking next year, winning time of possession and third downs, are we still complaining? Question: can I open my cigar yet? First off, Brendan, if we can get this defense to a 15 to 20 range, and where you are feeling that the offense is going to go, what does that equate out to a team on the football field as far as wins and losses and whatever their fulfillment is for the year at that point?
I mean, that should be a lot better than last year, right? Because the defense is up, and look, our offense was 9th in the league last year. The way I see it, we haven't really gotten worse anywhere. We got the same quarterback. I think we're better at running back. Charbonnet alone is better than 5 games a penny.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to add another running back either tomorrow or later this offseason. You got better at receiver. You swapped out Marquise Goodwin and Derrick Young for JSN. You're the same at tight end, and you're going to be better on the offensive line because you upgraded at center, and your 2 tackles who were rookies are now sophomores. So that should be a top 6 offense, I would think, minimum.
I would think as well. And so, Kevin, you got a top 6 offense, as Brendan's saying, which I think is very fair on Brendan's point. He could have gone over the top on that and said top 3, and I wouldn't push back on him. But let's go top 6. Let's say you go in the 15 to 20 range defensively, and then you're probably, from the advanced statistics, Brendan, fair enough to say we're going to be a top 3 special teams unit with all we've poured into it. So that's, you put those combinations together. I do think that's an 11-12 win team. And that's a team that has at that point of puncher's chance as much as anybody in a wide open NFC to bust through. Now it is the tall order to say, does the defense get to 15-20? That can be maybe an easier said than done, prognostication there.
Well, I think the defensive line is about equivalent to what it was last year. I think the linebackers, inside and outside, are a little bit better because we've added Bobby and brought in. I think Devin Bush is going to be a little better than Cody Barton overall. Maybe just a little, but a little. I think we're better at edge because we added Derrick Hall. And I think our secondary is going to be a lot better. Like, I don't see how it isn't. Even if Jamal gets hurt again, it's better. So I don't see how it isn't better.
Two factors I'd ask you on that, though, on the better side is, do you feel that where do you feel the schedule is going to be at next year compared to the schedule that we dealt with last year?
Yeah. The schedule is harder, and that's a thing, but that's also kind of independent variable, right?
It is an independent variable, but is it harder or significantly harder?
I think it is significantly harder, but at the same time, we can't know that, right? Like, we all thought the Rams were going to be one thing last year, and they ended up being one of the worst teams we played. And
It's
we played
true.
So it's really hard to know. Like, you look at the schedule and you're like, okay, that game, you can only go so far with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's where it comes to me is I think when you're going through that and saying, we got a little better here, got a little better there, a little better here, you're not wrong, 100% right. I just go, yeah, you might get better cumulatively as a team, but the overriding factor to me seems maybe two things that might bring you down just a little bit from getting a little bit further up, topping out, which would be the schedule being, I think, is just significantly harder is right. And then the injury situation, which it felt like was a little bit better last year as opposed to what it's been in normal years, historically speaking, here in Seattle. And if you lean back into those historical norms of the regression to the mean in both of these two aspects of things, because last year the schedule was much, much easier. So many games where you had on some offenses 4 of the top 5, 4 of the top 6 offensive players down for teams on a lot of weekly bases. The Saints game, the Detroit game, we can go through we can go through it. The Raiders game where they had no Hunter Renfrow, no Darren Waller. It was, Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams is all you had. That's not going to happen, I don't think, next year to that great of a degree. And so I think that's what it comes down to, is that balancing of a little bit better, but then this other part of the injury schedule thing being a little bit of a much bigger sort of swung stick at that point going up against that. And those two factors kind of colliding a bit for me.
Right.
Kevin, though, thank you for the $10 donation. And we're relaxed over here, man. We are. Daniel Robinson with a $5 donation says, how does the run game not matter when today's NFL has 10 to 12 quarterbacks capable of rushing for 700 plus yards? How are teams adapting to Fields, Allen, Hurts?
Well, here's my thing. The last 4 teams to win the Super Bowl all had somewhere between bad and terrible run games. The ball was a complete afterthought for the last 4 Super Bowl champions. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl a few years ago with nobody over 500 rushing yards, and I think they ranked like 28th in rushing. The Rams had an atrocious running game that year. They were like, I think, 29th or something. The Bucks were bad, and then Fournette did some stuff in the playoffs, and everyone kind of forgot how bad their running game was the whole year. And then, of course, last year you had the Chiefs again. They were a little bit better, but they were still well below average as a running team. So I look at that and I go, okay, what can we learn from this? Because the old NFL philosophy was, if you can run the ball and stop the run, you're going to win a lot of games. And that's the path to winning Super Bowls. And I look at the last few years and I'm like, I don't think that's true anymore. Like the angle of quarterbacks running for 700 plus yards is definitely interesting. But how often do we see that translating to winning a championship? It hasn't happened that much yet. You could say maybe a little bit with Mahomes because he does a little bit of that stuff, but not as nearly as much as some of these other guys. So
not as part of the read option game too.
Yeah, it hasn't. It's only happened a couple times. Like Lamar Jackson has 1 playoff win. Lamar Jackson has never played well in any playoff game he's ever played in.
Yeah.
So I look at these things and I go, well, I don't think running the ball really matters that much anymore. I'm watching these teams with no running game whatsoever that basically completely ignore it win Super Bowls.
I think your point's got a lot of salient ones within it. I don't come to the same spot myself, Daniel, and how my outlook is of it. I definitely think it's become less weighted over time, to Brendan's point of that. But it is one that does concern me still, in the respect of, there are those teams that may not be at the top of the stack that's winning Super Bowls, but there are those teams that certainly can knock you out of the playoffs that you're going to run into, that you don't have that matter to beat them. And right now, the main one team that you're going to run into mainly is one of the two is going to be, one of Philadelphia or the 49ers at some point in this NFC. And those teams will not try to start throwing the ball on you and just do it for the sake of doing it. They'll run down your throat all day long and not apologize for it. And do you have answers for that at times when you meet those teams at that point next year? Maybe you do. But I do think it's a concern and a worry and an issue, because I can't see the answers for it right now on the surface of things against the team in the Niners that you went 0-3 against last year. And a couple of those games, they really kind of ran away from you a bit on it with it. But I think it's an interesting discussion, Brendan, because this is about where this is going from an evolution standpoint. And I think you are right about this, about where we're seeing the drive of the game going towards, whether it's arrived there quite yet or whether it's in the process of, or, that's all the debatable parts of it, but it is in that sort of transition. Daniel, thank you for that $5 donation. I really do appreciate it. Tony Borges Silva with a $5 donation. Derrick Hall reminded me a lot of Draymond Jones. I think he's going to be playing inside a lot more so than edge. Ooh, there's a take on that. I wondered a bit this. I hadn't heard any talk of it. I was going to be interested in checking out Schneider and Carroll's presser in regards to Hall and their thoughts on this. But what's your angle on that one?
He's got some weight to put on if he wants to do that. He's what is he?
256.
Yeah, 256. He could do it a little bit, but probably not in a 3-4, right? Like if you do 4-3 and he wants to do the Michael Bennett slide into 3 tech on third down thing, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But in a 3-4, I think you're pushing it a little bit.
Yeah, I've thought, and I have nothing to base it on really, Tony, because I don't believe watching the tape Auburn used him inside at all. It was all edge stuff. So when we talk about saying we think he can go inside, it is a little bit on, well, I think because of this and that. Part of how he wins off the edge is a lot of the leverage, and he's got the 34.5 long inch arms. So you go, okay, if this guy goes inside he's got the leverage, the power, and that way of naturally winning. Will that translate inside if you move that inside? And I feel like, yeah, it would, because he brings that to bear. But Brendan's right. He is missing about 20 pounds of weight here to really be able to operate. Draymond's a good 280, 284, right, on game day, what he's operating. So, guys are going to kind of blow him out the hole at times at that size when you kick him inside. He would have to gain that little bit of weight. I don't know if the coaching staff wants to do that, because he's already not super twitchy from the standpoint of coming off the edge. He gains another 10 pounds. He goes from being a 159, 10-yard split guy to being a 165, 10-yard split guy. And now you really can't play him out on the outside all that much, except for maybe early downs as a run defender.
Right.
But thank you, Tony. Appreciate the $5 donation. Spencer Smith, thank you for the $5 donation as well. Fully understand the trench concerns. That said, it seems to me it's significant the roster potentially has a top 5 to 10 wide receiver room, cornerback room, and running back room.
Oh, better than that. I would hope top 3 receiver room, top 3 corner room. Running back, maybe more like top 6 or top 7. But yeah, I would hope you go a little beyond top 5 with receiver and cornerback with all the investments you've made there now.
Agreed. And how about we go top 5 tackle room on top of it with our 2 starters we're rocking out there right now? I know maybe the depth isn't as great, but at least the starters you feel great about. So it is significant, Spencer. It's not no thing. And this team, in very many ways, has a very high floor because of what they have to bring in a bear next year. Whether they reach a roof and a ceiling that gets beyond what they got to last year, we'll see if it comes together. But there's a lot of parts to this team that we know they're going to be a good, solid team. This is not one we have to wonder about if last year was just some mirage of, oh, it was just the weak schedule. Oh, it was just that. I know I talked a little bit about that, but I don't want to oversell it. That was a team that earned those wins and earned the right to go to that playoffs as they did. And there's more to build on than there more is that they have to rebuild from here at the end of the day. And that's encouraging. And that means this team's got some chances to break through even next year. The story's not told. We don't know how it's going to play out. Like Brendan said, with the schedule, it looks hard right now. But once the reality comes, man, things can change quite a bit. A few injuries break down a certain way, hit things right. You never know how it can go, man. So appreciate it, Spencer. You're on it, man. On it with that. John Stillwell, thank you for the $20 donation. You guys are just awesome on the donos. Appreciate you. Says, just have a second, but I did see an analysis of the trade with Denver using the new chart being used by a lot of teams. Can't remember the name of it. And it showed the Hawks had won that one by a big margin. We haven't had a chance to talk about the trade yet, Brendan. So I guess this is as good a time as any to jump into the trade. The Hawks did make a deal at the end of the third round with their final pick, going to Denver, who I'm sorry. Brendan, are you surprised George Patton's even picking up the phone when John Schneider calls at this point?
Well, trading up right now is supposed to be a pretty lucrative thing, right? Like you trade up, you're getting good value these days. But well, did they? I mean, let's talk about this. Let's try to figure this out.
Mm-hmm. Well, you let me. I want to see where you're at on. What is your standpoint with it?
Well, according to the Jimmy Johnson chart, we got fleeced. It was like really bad. On the Rich Hill chart, we won by like 2 points, so it was basically even.
Yeah.
And using the new draft trade calculator tool that they have on like PFF or whatever, which we won the trade by a lot. So it just depends on your perspective. It's like the glass half full, glass half empty thing.
Yeah. And eventually the Jimmy Johnson chart's going to reach a point where it's 30 years ago. You know, like that's when that thing was established. It's got to get to the outdated point at some point or another, right? There's got to be some better refinement.
I think it's time to set that chart on fire. Teams are clearly nowhere near using it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Stuff changes about the draft, the value of the draft, how picks are viewed. And it just is that way now. From my standpoint, I'm okay with the trade being going down. There wasn't some Adetwami Adewale, maybe it would be the one name inside wise that was kind of left that you could get kind of hot to trot on that they maybe passed on by not going there. But there was no lock dead name that made me like upset about it. And what I like about it is another poster John presented above about that extra third round pick is that only gives you a pick that maybe could turn into being a high third round pick next year from Denver if they're not going to be a good team in a tough division, in a tough conference. But on top of that, what you get is maybe a pick that you can use as a trade chip of, okay, we go get that veteran defensive lineman. We go get that help down on the trenches. And now we can use that third round pick to go back over in that manner. And it's a creative fashion to do so. So I like that also from that standpoint, Brendan, is that gives you that kind of flexibility with that. So
yeah,
nothing but good for me on this trade, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm in the middle on it. I think it's fine. I don't think we won it. I don't think we lost it. I will say it's going to feel very differently in a year. When you're sitting there and you have a extra third rounder there for nothing, especially if we get Adi in the fourth. If we get Adi at 108, then there's nothing to say other than we did an amazing job, because I'm looking at the list of guys who got drafted at and after 83, which is where we picked. And I'm looking at the guys who maybe I would have liked. There's Diane Henley, Trenton Simpson. There's maybe Kobe Turner, although I don't really know about that one. Maybe Darnell, although maybe he's not going to play any football this year, I guess, with the way teams were treating him. I like Jordan Battle a lot, but I didn't really want him at that point. I don't really like Ika that much, but I think the value would have been okay in the third round. And like, that's it. Like, I didn't want Trey Tucker. I didn't want Cameron Latu. I didn't want Michael Wilson. I didn't want maybe DeMarvion Overshone was kind of nice. I kind of liked him, but I didn't want Riley Moss. I didn't want Tank Bigsby. So if we end up getting Adi anyway, then that's amazing.
It is indeed. So especially if you get Adi and then Sika, and that's your combination in the fourth round that you pull out of. So there's a way to still turn this in to feel like pretty good about the bodies you're bringing into bear. You bring those guys in. What if you made some trade to get more of a standout, impactful guy to bring all of it together, bring the room together, so to speak. It's why I say we got to wait for this a little bit and just see how it fully kind of plays out to see how it goes to bear. But I'm okay with it. I like the trade. I like the future capital. I like what that gives you. And like you said, next year, if they said at the top of it, that thing's at the back end of a second round, right? That's the top end third round pick because they're a top 5 bottom team, which very possible there in his first year. It's no guarantee that they're just going to come back, especially through how bad Russell looked last year. He's out there flipping golf carts, Brendan. I mean, it's getting bad. So
yeah. And it's a third round pick. So whether it's at the top or at the bottom of the round, it doesn't matter as much. It's not like this most recent year.
Correct. Yeah, I'm with you on that in that respect of things. So, yeah, I'm okay with the trade, John. I like the trade. I like that we got these picks. I certainly would have been more in favor coming in this draft and maybe trying to take some of these picks at the back end of the draft and package them together to come back up and get an extra second rounder. John decided not to do that. He trusts a little bit more in the depth of this draft than I do. Like Brennan's going through those names of guys that are available that I didn't want this guy, didn't want that way. We're getting in the spot of that draft now where I think, Brendan, you would agree with me on this, where you just don't, these guys are a little in that just a guy kind of phase of things, right? We're going to get into that spot of this pretty quickly in this draft, into this 4th round even.
I got a decent chunk of guys who I thought were going to be gone by now that I would be pretty excited, that I think are a little better than Jaggy.
That's fair enough. That's
Decent
fair enough.
list.
Yeah, I'd still be excited by some guys. Not that there's empty. It's just if I'm talking about this draft being one where I wanted to stack up an extra 6-round picks on the back end from 4 to 7, this wouldn't have necessarily been that kind of draft I would have looked at in that fashion. Is that a fair enough way?
Yeah, I think that if we come out of the 4th round tomorrow with like Colby Wooden and maybe Jared Clark, people are feeling very differently.
Oh, at least feeling better. That's definitely for sure. They're definitely feeling better about the situation. To your point there. Barry Satoro, thank you for the $5 donation. Appreciate you. It says, is there any future cap casualty defensive tackles that will be cut post-draft week 1?
There always are, but it's hard to know who they are yet because a lot of teams prove that they're always able to find other ways to save money. Like I remember in previous years, every year the Rams would cruise towards the deadline way over the cap. And then there would be some article that gets released like 3 minutes before the deadline where they had to get under. That's like, oh, the Rams restructured with 800 different players to get under the cap. They didn't have to release, and it's like they never release anybody. So it's hard to know who it's going to be, but there usually are at least a few.
Agreed. It is a couple that come up. The tough part with this too, Barry, is a lot of teams that are, even if they're eyeballing cutting, first off, you used to do June 1st. That's out the door now because teams can just designate to June 1st. They don't have to wait anymore. So the guys are already cut who would have been used in prior years, used to be the June 1st cuts. So what you get now is you go through training camp, Barry, where teams they think, well, we got this guy we probably are going to end up cutting for cap reasons, but let's just get through training camp. Let's make sure the rookie or second year guy is going to take his step forwards. And if he can take a step forward, then he'll be the starter, and then we'll cut him right at the end. But you got to wait on those until the very end of the training camp at that point, until all of the process is played out. And it's very hard to predict which guy is going to be on which of those teams to get cut at that spot this far out, because we're talking all the way into the depths of training camp and who's going to step forward and who's going to remain and who's not going to, it's kind of too many moving parts on that to predict at this moment, Barry, because nothing's imminent on a cut or cap casualty spot. I don't think you'll come out of this draft with guys being cut like, well, they got their defensive tackle, so now they'll cut them. I don't think there's, Tampa Bay got Kalijah Cansey, they're going to cut Villa. No, they're going to pair those two guys together,
Yeah.
So, give me your top 5 names for tomorrow. I don't care where in the draft you got them. I don't care 6th round, 7th round. I don't care if it's just a guy that you got that you like that no one else likes in the 6th round. But give me
Keely Ringo, even though it doesn't really make sense at this point. Like I thought he was going to be, late 1st, early 2nd. So I'd say Keely Ringo. Adi Bawore is up there. Clark Phillips III, although again, doesn't really make a lot of sense anymore. But I like him.
It's a good player.
Emil Ekiyor Jr., I think, would be an amazing right guard for this offense. I love him.
I do too.
And I don't know. I'm a little torn on this one. I want to say Luke Whippler. I don't think he's a great fit, but I do think he's much better than a 4th round pick. And why did Juice Scruggs go before Luke Whippler? How did that happen?
I don't know. You watched the tape on Juice. Did you like it? I just was unimpressed. He looks like the part, but he just kind of just a guy out there just doing whatever to me. I wasn't bowled over by his tape. I liked Wolper much better on his tape. I liked Olsung Oluwatimi better. I think he's a better fit. Even Jarrett Patterson out of Notre Dame, Brendan. And you like him better than Scruggs?
Yeah, I think I like Jake Andrews out of Troy better than Scruggs.
Yeah, not very hot. That was a head scratching pick. Who's you got as your winner and loser in this draft so far?
Well, the loser. Can you say the Niners? Because they didn't really have picks. Maybe that doesn't even really count.
Can't count them. They didn't have any picks.
Loser, probably the Lions, man. What are they doing? I mean, they kind of saved it with Brian Branch, but I think the rest of their draft has been Like Hendon Hooker was okay, but I think that like Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell that high was kind of a disaster.
Sam Laporta at the top of the second round.
Yeah, I didn't like that either. The winner. I mean, a lot of people are saying the Eagles, and I get why. They're a reasonable pick. They're doing really well for themselves. Other than that, who else might be like considered like a winner? I think the Steelers did really well.
Steelers are having a strong draft. Yeah, they're doing really good. I like what I'm seeing out of them. I got a loser for you on this one. What about the Raiders? Tyree Wilson at the top, Michael Mayer back in the second round, Byron Young, not the Tennessee guy, but the Alabama guy in the third, and then Trey Tucker out of Cincinnati, a wide receiver in the third round.
I think Meyer was a reasonable pick. The other picks I'm not so high on. Yeah, that's a good one.
I'm big on the. You know I'm big on the Eagles, man. You know what I thought of Sidney Brown, and Sidney Brown was their last pick. They got Steen, which is like a James Carpenter clone. He'll be on that. He'll be another guy. Just put him right in that line and work. And then Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter. I'm just like, dude, they're killing this draft, Brendon. They're killing it. Sidney and Jalen's gonna haunt our dreams for like 5 years.
I don't know. Maybe.
We'll see. We'll see if I'm right. If I'm right on it, we'll see. Who else did you have? You mentioned another team there. I cut you off on that. What'd you say?
I guess the Packers are doing pretty badly.
Yeah, I'm not the 2 tight end stuff. Are they copying us? Is that what's happening? And then they went Jaden Reed too. Like strange.
I liked Reed, but not in the second.
Not in the second. Not in the second there, especially if you're going to squish him between 2 tight ends. Doesn't make a ton of sense there. Cowboys, I think, are having a weird draft too.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of their draft. This is going to be controversial, but I actually think Houston's having a bad draft, even though they got 2 phenomenal players. Because I think their trade up to get Will Anderson was suspect when you look at what everyone else is giving up to trade up.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think the Juice Scruggs thing is beyond bizarre and beyond awful. Like F minus.
Yeah, even taking Nathaniel Dell at the top of the third rather than him maybe drifting down a little bit deeper. So I think you could definitely ding them a little bit. That future first round pick to Arizona is very, very, very likely to turn into a top 5 pick in that tough AFC conference. Arizona made another trade, picked up more draft capital. I was like, dude, stop trading with Arizona. And then at least Arizona made a stupid Arizona pick. So it was like, okay, they're at least still Arizona. So I can at least count on them to still mech up the pick, but they were making some trades that were pretty interesting on that. And I guess they didn't do too bad. They got Paris Johnson, BJ. The Garrett Williams pick was the Garrett Williams one for me with Arizona.
Yeah, I didn't like that one very much.
I had a 6th round grade, I think, on him as a cornerback. I hated that.
4th round. I liked him a little more than you did, but it's still bad.
Still a little bit of a head scratcher. They did all right, I guess, around the other picks out there.
Yeah.
Kevin, thank you for the $5 donation. I do appreciate you, man. He says, any pick of any organization is a win in my book. Now, any future pick of any organization is a win in my book. Just missing 1,000 pounds of defensive line mass, and that can be solved quick tomorrow. Smartest Seattle stream on the web. Oh man, thank you so much, Kevin. I really do appreciate you on that, man. And definitely we need to get about 1,000 pounds to get it done, right, Brendon? About 8,000 pounds to get it done. You figure?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's I mean, let's think about it right now. Like if we add Adetomiwa Adebawore, I think he's probably the starter day 1 over Jerron Reed. That would be my bold prediction if we got him.
Agreed.
And then if you get Jared Clark, I guess he has to start at nose tackle because he's literally the only nose tackle.
He is.
Like you still like, and then you're probably looking at adding somebody like maybe you get Moro Ojomo
or Coburn, one of the 2 Texas boys.
Yeah, and then you got your 1,000 pounds.
We got your 1,000 at that point. It's doable, Kevin. These guys will be guys that will be, at least I think, Brendon, fair to say, even though they're going to be late round defensive linemen, there's linemen that can come into a rotational basis and help you out a little bit. Maybe they'll be one-trick ponies as just run defenders and give you nothing as pass rushers, but they will give you something on the field. You're getting something out of them, I think, with these guys that do remain. But they've got to start jumping at some point on these defensive linemen, Brendon. They go much more rounds into any more depth into like late 5th, 6th, then it's woo. It's going to get dicey quick, man.
Yeah.
Thank you though, Kevin. Appreciate all the, sorry, what'd you say?
No, nothing.
Oh, my bad. I'm getting a little saucy here on the thing. Appreciate you, Kevin, though, on the donation, man. And very kind of you to say on that. And if you guys haven't, by the way, please do go over to Seahawks Brendon Nelson here on YouTube and sub up over to his channel. Would really appreciate it. Daniel Robinson with a $2 donation says, what do you think of Jacqueline Roy? What did you think about Jacqueline Roy?
I think I liked him, but I thought he would be a better fit for a 4-3. Let me check this out here real quick. Let me make sure I got that right.
And so for me, Daniel, I've got a zero tech. This is probably why Brendan was thinking this. He's built a little leaner than most zero techs. He's a pure 305 at 6'3", 305. He's got good lock-on power rather than a punch. So he's not a heavy punch guy, heavy-handed guy. He's just good lock-on power. Like when a wrestler locks up at the center of a ring, that's when his strength kicks in my opinion. I thought he was better in 21 than 22, plus effort, but he does have very little burst help as a pass rusher. Good swim move, comfortable stunting, and can loop around, getting lateral fast while still engaged. He covers more territory than your average zero tech, which you'd hope to get a guy 300 pounds. Does get a little high as a pass rusher. Brendan gets on that one a lot, I know. And double teams can give him issues, which is a little bit of an issue for a guy at the zero tech. But he can root. He brings some skill. He just doesn't quite root down for as much as you usually like. I like him. I think Brendan's probably right with his original assessment on this, where might be a better guy into more of a one tech role than up here zero.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I said he's worth a 4th round pick, but probably not here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I did like him. Nice combination of size and athleticism. Got a great frame for interior line play. Quick enough to keep up on outside runs. Good gap penetrator against the run. But raw, going to need some time to unlock his full potential. So I liked him, but I don't see it.
Yeah, I'm okay taking late 4th round in this draft on him, Daniel, because I did have a 4th round grade. So the value is where the value is at on this. It would definitely fit to that. I worry about him on that as far as holding up, but he can always gain a little bit more weight, I suppose. He does bring some skill to the position, which is nice at this point in the draft to be able to grab. Probably would like, maybe the Coastal Carolina kid. Brendan mentioned Jared Kark a little bit better. Might be a couple other guys that'd be a little more attractive. Adhori, most certainly. But if you start getting pilfered through this 4th round, Brendan, you end up in the 4th round, Jacqueline Roy's on the board, and that's your number one, zero tech left, and you haven't gone to the cupboard yet. Not the worst direction to go on that, Daniel. A guy who should probably find his way at least onto the football field occasionally at the next level. Don't know if he'll be a starter, but maybe just, at least here and there in that respect of things. Thank you for the donation. So we do, I think we did cover this pretty good as far as that goes. Brendan, we're an hour and a half in. I know you've been streaming all day here the last couple of days. Anything else on your mind as far as the draft coverage goes here today, or anything you're kind of thinking about in regards to what you're seeing and just overall observations?
I'm just ready to see what goes down tomorrow.
I as well. We've got 6 picks tomorrow, folks. We're not even halfway through this thing as far as our selections are concerned. So there is a lot of damage in a good way yet to be done by our Seattle Seahawks. A lot of good players that we could go out here and potentially be still coming away with in this draft. Value that's dipped and dropped. So it is not over yet. I still think this has been a strong draft for our Seahawks. I don't think they've missed on any selection. Fair to say, Brendan, we've not had any position on this that you're swinging and you're missing on, that you're like, what the hell are you guys doing? You may not like the pick, but I don't think anybody can really say what the hell. You might not like that they aren't addressing another pick, but if we're just talking about the pick, the player, who they are, and what they're bringing to the table, I think it's hard to deny that these guys are definitely going to help. Fair enough on that?
Yeah. We have clearly gotten better. Maybe we haven't gotten better in the exact ways that some people wanted, but we did get better. And maybe the opportunities to get better in the exact way that some people wanted just wasn't there. In fact, I think that's probably the case.
Yeah, I agree. And it's understandable that there's definitely going to be some rifts out there in the Seahawks fandom and what they think on this in this draft because of that. But at the end of the day, whether it brings the instantaneous returns next year or not, Brendan, this organization, I think, is operating from a smart standpoint. Their philosophy is right, and they're bringing together that in a way that whether the returns are here next year or we have to wait a little bit on the long term for them, those returns will come because things are being done in a smart fashion. I think you do feel the same way, but that's really the last resounding point I want to walk away from on this stream coverage a little bit for tonight is that this is going to bear out the fruits. The fruits might take a little longer to grow, but the fruits will grow.
I agree.
Fantastic. Well, we will be actually taking a break from the BNB Show tomorrow because me and Brendan will literally be on death's door by the end of our streams tomorrow on our live coverage. So we are going to be coming back with you guys on Sunday after the Sea Dragons play on Sunday in the playoffs. So
Yeah.
we'll be back on Sunday at 3:30 over on Brendan's channel, the BNB Show over there. I might very well just be streaming during the Sea Dragons for the hell of it myself on my side on my channel. So we'll see about that on Sunday on my end of it. But 3:30 sharpish. So as the Sea Dragons fly, me and Brendan will be over on his channel discussing this whole draft in total, all the picks as we go through the last day of the draft, and what it means for our Seahawks as we go forward into this next season. Brendan, I've had an awesome job doing this coverage with you here on the channels, going back to forth. Thank you so much for coming on in here after I know it's been a long couple of days for you streaming on your end of it over there on Seahawks Brendon Nelson.
It's worth it though. It's worth it.
Absolutely worth it. And hopefully these drafts will show us that here in the future on that. Folks, please do 3 different things for me on the way out the door as we finish up here tonight. Hit that like button. Please do subscribe on up here if you're not already subscribed on up. Go over to Seahawks Brendon Nelson. Type that in the search and it easily will pop up first thing right there. Sub up over to his channel. Would really appreciate it. We'll be back in 2 days over on his side of it. But until then, as we go into the final day of the draft with 6 picks in our back pocket, a draft that can still prove to be mighty historical here for your Seattle Seahawks. I hope we don't got fandoms out there that is starting to forget a little bit about the potential greatness abroad and up ahead for this team. But just in case they are, Brendan, in case we've got some folks wavering, in case we've got a few folks out there who feel a little bit torn, let's remind them. Let's let them know. Let's let them understand that we're in a good place and we're about to go ahead into a great place. So let's keep that at the forefront of our mind, folks. Thank you for all your support, all the donations in the chat. But don't you ever forget. Don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.